Welcome to Adeptus On-Air, the show where we examine how individuals and companies make decisions that drive their business and personal success. Each week, we connect with notable professionals who pull back the curtain on the industries that Adeptus has been on the cutting edge of for the last 30 years, including music, sports, and entertainment, as well as new emerging markets. Welcome to the latest edition of Adeptus On Air. Today we have a special guest in Dr. Terry Zachary, who is a hand specialist who works with professional athletes. So Terry, thank you. Thank you very much for joining us.
James, great to be here. Looking forward to our conversation. I really like your program.
I appreciate that. Thanks a lot. And looking at your background as well, very, very interesting. How did you just give me the origin story. How did you get into the science of hands, of studying hands?
Yeah, I think, James, it started out, I just had a natural curiosity, never specifically of hands until I started to see some problems. But as a kid, I was like many of us, I was a sports junkie, and I grew up on golf. And then, basically I'm Canadian, so I grew up in hockey first, then probably golf second. Then I got into basketball kind of when I was in early high school, maybe elementary school, I guess. But there was always some reference to the hands, when you grip in golf. In hockey, it was a lot about strength and puck battles and how you can shoot the puck and stuff like that. And then when I got into basketball, it was a little bit more like range of motion and touch and how do you shoot the ball properly and put spin on it. And, a lot about mechanics. But all my love of sports got me into, I'm deciding I wasn't really good enough to be a successful professional anything. It seemed like, even though I took a run at golf, which I can get to if you need to. But when I was younger, I needed a vocation. And because, getting better at sports demanded learning how the body worked, I chose to be a sports chiropractor. I wanted to be, I wanted to take care of people and spend my time learning how it all worked. And that's what led me to go in to sports chiropractic in general. And in my practice, because we saw so many hockey players and golfers, James, I just saw these repetitive grip injuries. And it wasn't what most people think a repetitive grip injury was, like where your hands or your thumbs, like thumbs or finger or hand stuff. A lot of it was looking at carpal tunnel syndrome and seeing how the carpal tunnel shuts down, and basically, looking at no research on the area as far as mechanics go. And I started to see that the carpal tunnel shuts down because the grip muscles shorten and there's no opposition. And then I also got into, I think it's a long introduction, but I also got into tennis elbow a lot from the golf days. I did travel on mini tours eventually in my career. I tried to take a shot at the PGA Tour, but yeah, James, if you don't recognize the face, that's how successful I was. But it was really good for me because I was traveling with professional golfers for 3 years, and they got to know that I was a sports chiropractor. I'd already been in practice for a few years, and I took a run at this. So I got to really gain their confidence. And then as I saw the repetitive grip injuries, especially, man, a lot of elbow stuff, a lot of wrist stuff in professional golf, I saw that they really had no idea what they were doing. And they don't spend their life looking at these types of problems. So I did. And so I was able to really educate them. And at that point in my life, I probably had 6 or 7 separate exercises that I would give them. And realizing that we need to strengthen and balance the hand muscles, which are quite intricate. They would never do them because it was really too many exercises, too much to remember. They also had a lot of other fitness areas to think about. And then I developed a product where you could basically do all the exercise, all the muscles through a full range of motion in one exercise. And that way I realized, man, this is doable. Anybody could do this, even a golfer that hardly has any time. So that's what gets me to where we're at today.
That's awesome. That's awesome. You mentioned about 3 or 4 things that we'll definitely get to. But one of the things that you mentioned is carpal tunnel. I think that's a phrase that a lot of people hear, especially in the corporate world, as far as from, typing on keyboards and things like that. Can you define exactly what carpal tunnel is and just break down the condition?
Yeah, I'll give you a kind of a 30,000 foot overview. Is when people say carpal tunnel, they usually mean carpal tunnel syndrome. But the carpal tunnel itself is basically made up of finger and thumb, finger flexor tendons and thumb flexor tendons. And it's a small area, basically right, right in your, if you put your little finger and your thumb together and it makes a little cleavage, that's about where the carpal tunnel is. It's about as thick on most people as a thumb, and so there's not much room there. The top of the carpal tunnel has a transverse ligament that kind of holds the tendons in when you go to flex your fingers and flex your wrist forward. And that's a common thing that we do. So if you think of that small area with all these flexor tendons going through it, so it's got basically has the deep. I won't get too much into it, but it's got four of the deep finger flexor tendons that go all the way through to your fingers, and four of the superficial flexor tendons that go to different parts of your fingers. But they all eight of those flex the fingers. You also have a thumb flexor that goes through the carpal tunnel. So there's a lot of mechanics that go through there. But what also goes through there is this median nerve, which supplies the muscles with innervation, but also sensory information and whatnot. So a lot is happening in that little space, and the problem is that in our repetitive grip, and this is one of the things, and yes, I saw it in golfers for the 3 years that I played professional golf, but I saw it, James, for years in people that were in office or people that were in hockey was pretty common with that, but people that sew, usually intricate stuff, dental profession, I saw a lot of it with our patients. So basically what happens is you actually have five muscles that directly attach on that transverse ligament that goes across the top of the carpal tunnel, and the bottom of that carpal tunnel is basically made of the bones of your wrist. You can look that up anywhere online, and it's pretty straightforward explanation. But what happens is because there's muscles that actually attach onto that transverse carpal ligament, whenever we flex, we're actually shortening it. It kind of shortens the carpal tunnel, and it basically collapses it a little bit, but we're not doing anything to oppose it. And that goes for almost anything, I'll say, for the fingers and thumb and wrist and forearm and elbow too. But the carpal tunnel specifically, the actual tunnel itself, starts to shut down. The other thing that happens is that because we're going through pretty small range of motion in our gripping, is we don't really stimulate a lot of blood flow through the carpal tunnel and a lot of venous drainage and lymph drainage away from the carpal tunnel. So it's almost like there's a bit of a traffic jam, in the fluid flow through and away from the carpal tunnel. So inevitably, it's a long talking point, but basically pressure starts to build up in that carpal tunnel, and when the pressure builds up, the median nerve begins to be affected. The pressure could come from the swelling of the tendons. It can come from just poor blood flow. It can come from the collapse, but it's a mechanical thing. And when we talk to people about the carpal tunnel itself, not carpal tunnel syndrome, but we say, let's make that carpal tunnel thrive and let's exercise the muscles that open and spread the hand. If any of your audience is on video, I know you do audio too, but if I'm strengthening the muscles on the back of the hand that open and spread the carpal tunnel, and I train those to be strong, I can keep that carpal tunnel nice and wide. And because I'm exercising my extremities through a full range of motion, I'm going to get good blood flow and better lymph drainage through there. And we can virtually solve the carpal tunnel problem. The problem with carpal tunnel syndrome is that most people, there's so little information about this, proper information about this area, that we take something and squeeze it, or we do nothing for our hands, and that's what causes this type of collapse.
No, that's interesting because that's something you hear, athletes in offices alike, the people that aren't athletes and everything. That seems like a common issue. Um, I had no idea about there were dozens of muscles in the hand. You would kind of think just as a novice that maybe a few here and a few there, but how many total muscles are in the hand? And, can you kind of break down the muscle groups?
Yeah, absolutely. I rarely get this question. I usually have to force this question on people, but what it is, James, is so, and I think it's also, just to put it in perspective, like I'm pretty hard on the education that we're giving people about the hands, like historically. But the other thing that I will say is it's a very complicated area. So it's not something you can usually sit somebody down and go, well, here's this muscle and that muscle, and that you bore people to tears. But the way I can present it, and I think is it's more complicated than this, but not much more complicated, is that if you look on the front of your hand, so from so you have 9 muscles that close the hand. They're
Okay.
basically on the front of your thumb, fingers, hand, wrist, carpal tunnel, forearm, and elbow. So those muscles are throughout the front of your hand, wrist, forearm, and all the way down to your elbow. The reason I point that out is so that you generally understand the anatomy, but also you understand that if we get into imbalance, it's not just the fingers and the thumbs and the hand. It's the
Mm-hmm.
wrist and the carpal tunnel and the forearm and the elbow. And that's one of the things about grip that we'll get into as we go. If you look at the back of your hand, opposingly, it's quite simple. There's 9 muscles that are on the back of your fingers, thumb, hand, wrist, carpal tunnel, forearm, and elbow. Okay? So really, it's almost like posturing. And we have a certain amount of postural muscles in the front of our body, certain on the back. And if we just train the front ones, just like, the 15-year-old guy that wants to, strengthen the biceps and the chest to show off to the girls and he forgets about the back, pretty soon he's having rib problems and back problems and neck problems, etc. It's very similar. So that's the 9 muscles that close the hand, the 9 muscles that open the hand. Now, also your forearm, depending on what your activity is, I might be a guitar player, I might be a golfer, or you might be a gymnast. You're going to be using your hand, your grip muscles in different positions. So there's 9 muscles in the forearm that are very, very important because, for example, for professional golfers, there's certain motions they're going to do on a regular basis. They're going to hit hundreds of golf shots, if not thousands of golf shots, including practicing every day, or a tennis player, or, pick your poison, somebody that's in the gym all the time. You want to make sure that you strengthen the 9 muscles in the forearm that position the wrist for grip so that you also maintain those in there, keep them strong and balanced and with proper length, with healthy length. So really there's 9 muscles that close the hand, there's 9 muscles that open the hand, and throughout the forearm, there's 9 muscles that position the wrist in whatever that grip is doing. But one thing I'll say, James, we'll get the complicated stuff out of the way early, is that the big thing about grip, for your listeners to remember, is that when we look at taking something and squeezing it, and I think traditionally we've looked at, well, that must be these muscles in front here that do all the work. So therefore, same thing I was told when I was a kid, I'm going to take this spring-loaded or
Yeah,
coiled gripper,
I
and I'm
remember
going to
that.
use, yeah, and I'm just going to do what I
Yeah.
see, and I'm going to strengthen that. Well, the problem with that is, James, and I can see this like over the years with working with hockey players and golfers, especially because it demands a pretty firm grip, is that the muscles, those muscles do, those 9 muscles do control the closing to grip. But just as importantly, on the back of your hand, these muscles in the back of your hand are supportive muscles. So anytime I grip something, if these muscles didn't contract, I would just be, it would just be loosey goosey like this, and I'd still be gripping. So these muscles are contracting in support. The problem is if we only squeeze using a coiled gripper or a spring-loaded gripper, and I forget about the muscles that open and spread, I'm only training these muscles in a static position. Like, does that make sense? If I'm
Yeah.
squeezing something, these can go through quite a full range of motion, but these are only contracting through my entire grip life statically. They're holding it statically. It's like me holding a brick and saying I'm training my bicep. Well, people would say, "Well,
Yeah.
that's crazy. You've got to
Yeah.
move it through a full range of motion."
Yeah.
That's what we do with this whole area. So we make these static ropes. That's why we have so many wrist problems,
Yeah.
forearm problems, and elbow problems. But it's also why, if we're not training grip properly, if I'm just taking a coiled gripper or a spring-loaded gripper, my grip strength will go up for a while, and then it'll plateau. And then because of the imbalance, it'll start to go down, and then you start to get in that injury area. And again, if you're a golfer or something like that, you just need to hit, one one shot in the heavy rough, and that could be it for the whole elbow and everything. So we
Wow.
want to educate that whole area and how grip works so people can get the idea and train properly.
Wow. No, that's tremendous information. That's awesome. I had a couple of those coil things, probably more than a couple, just
Yep.
growing up, and I was told it would help your hand shake and
Yeah.
firm and all that stuff. And
And,
um,
and I think almost everybody's been told that, James. Like we talk to people at, I've been at this for a long time. We talk to even professionals at trade shows and lay people, and they the same thing. We've always been, even me, like I say, when I grew up, before I studied this area specifically and saw the injuries, I was, it was always something that we would squeeze only.
Excellent. I appreciate that information, Dr. Terry. And question about the wrists. I've had pain in my wrist before. It's always kind of weird. I don't really know what to do. It hurts like heck. Maybe put a little ice on it, but I don't really know how to treat it or what to do with a wrist injury. It just feels like it's in a weird spot all the time. How would you explain the risk and how to take care of it and how to treat it?
Yeah, the wrist is I would say tricky. Like it looks like it's tricky, but after you look at, and again, we've really simplified because out of necessity, so that we can get people to understand the importance of training this grip area, the hand muscles in the grip area through a full range of motion. But it actually is once you understand those muscles, it's actually fairly simple to train them. Now, I'm going to reverse it a little bit. If somebody's had some problems, like there's so many good soft tissue techniques, and that's one of the most common things we see in wrist injuries. Uh, and again, pick whoever you want. It could be ergonomic problems that they've had, could be sports, it could be music. But that's where we talked about the really important thing is that you've got 9 muscles that position your wrist. Okay, so I'll take for example, because I've seen it a lot in hockey players. If you can imagine a hockey stick comes down and it's going to be on a certain lie, like it's going to be on a certain lie based on how hot the stick is and how hockey's played. And my wrist is generally going to be in the same angle all the time that I hold that. Well, you take a serious young hockey player or a professional hockey player, which we see both a lot, and they've been doing that for years and years and years. So those 9 wrist muscles, really, there's certain ones that are shortened, certain ones that are weakened, and there's imbalance throughout that form, and that will show a lot at the wrist. You'll get some wrist muscles that the grip and the angle of the wrist is so dependent on, and I'm using 2 hands here, it could be the bottom hand, but they become so dependent and there's so much stress. So there's repetition plus the stress of the hockey shot and the puck battle and face off, etc.
Mm.
But you can apply it to anything, apply it to guitar and all this similar motions. That those muscles, when you're doing it that way, over time, they get so thickened and fibrous, the body adapts into this one position that's favoring because it's trying to make that area stronger. But what it's actually doing is making it more imbalanced and more open to more inflexible. So that's what I'd say, James, for yours on the wrist. When we get a wrist situation, that's always the case. There's been this long-term, again, no understanding about the muscles of grip that do go all the way past the wrist, the carpal tunnel in the wrist and the forearm and the elbow. But if the pain is at the wrist, first thing I'll always suggest to people is look up. There's many soft tissue techniques. There's a thing called the active release technique. There's a thing called Graston technique. There's massage therapists. There's sports soft tissue specialists. Um, Find somebody that works with the upper extremity, because the best way to go about rehabilitating, retraining that area is to just get those muscles that have been thickened and maybe fibrosed a little bit in repair. Maybe get them broken down in soft tissue so you get a little bit more range of motion. And that's where you would look at, again, I made reference to the product that we developed. So we developed a product called Handmaster Plus. I pitch it because it's a really good product. And with the Handmaster Plus, I can do it. And I'd show it to you, but I can show you the mechanics of it, James.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
That was my next question actually to
yeah,
kind of speak on the product Handmaster Plus and how you created it.
yeah, and I'll actually show you that because on the business side of things, it's pretty interesting, and it only came out of necessity, as most things do. But I'm going to show you. So if I've told you, which is true, that there's 9 muscles that close the hand, there's 9 muscles that open hand, there's 9 muscles that control the wrist. Okay, so if I want to exercise all of those in one uh, continuous exercise, I would close, I would open and spread, and then I would do a figure 8 at the wrist. Okay,
Yeah,
and that without resistance, you'll even be able to feel a little bit that you'll start to get some blood flow, and that is the basis. So the basis of how we develop the product. Before we develop the product, James, what would happen is I'd have to give you individual exercises for all those muscle groups, and
mm-hmm.
your eyes would spin. You'd be bored. But once you get past that first thing, 9 muscles closed, 9 muscles open, 9 muscles control the forearm, the product, I'll show you it real quick because that's the product.
Yeah.
And the reason I show you how the hand moves is because this thing, this Handmaster Plus, this is a red medium one. It does nothing more than resist your natural motion. Okay. And I say that, James, because I always have a little critique of, like, you've seen the coiled, we've all had those coiled or spring loaded grippers. Well,
Mm-hmm.
those things are built, they're basically one plane, right? So you're not, the way the design of the product is the way you have to move your hand. Well, that's not the way the hand moves. The hand moves through 3 dimensions. So I won't get it, but just like I do, so all I'm going to do is I'm going to put that on the thumb. So it's just a simple custom ball with a custom cord going through it that attaches onto your fingers and thumb. So that same exercise that I just did, okay, all I'm going to do is
Oh
I'm going to
wow.
close against the ball. I'm going to open and spread against the cord, and with my hands open, I'm going to do a figure eight, okay, or a couple
Huh.
of figures eight. So I squeeze, I open and spread, I do a figure eight, okay, and that's the only exercise you really need to do. And now I know that I'm training all of those muscles through their full range of motion,
Wow.
and
Wow.
I know I'm taking all the joints and structures into balance, and that's the big thing. So that exercise that I just did, for somebody that just starts, you'd probably be able to do that for about 30 seconds and you'd be, crying for mom, basically. There's so many muscles that you're resisting.
Wow.
But
Wow.
that's just because we've never trained that area properly. And we're making a big difference on everybody we touch, getting them to easily train their grip and their hand muscles properly. For yours, if you had seen it, you go see a soft tissue person, they break down some adhesions, they get you moving better, and then you do recovery exercises with Handmaster Plus, and now you know you're going through full range of motion for strength and balance and blood flow, and you're really off to the races without, being too confused.
It's awesome. How long has the product been on the market, and how did you create it?
Yeah, so the product's been on the market for about, probably over 10 years.
Wow.
We create the way I created it is and really I was in practice when we started this. Um, I just after it was clear that I wasn't going to make the PGA Tour and I wasn't going to make a living at golf, I said, okay, well, backup plan, and so got back into practice. I love practice, so it wasn't too sad for me. But when I got into practice, I said, on the side, I would like to start trying to figure out how to develop it. I had made a really rough prototype of what you saw when I was on tour, so I could give it to because I was still trying to play and I didn't have much time to talk to people about this stuff. I made a really rough prototype and I gave that to a few people when I got back, and it really worked well. So when I got back in practice, I said, I don't know a thing about manufacturing. I didn't know a thing about it, but I wanted to start asking questions of people. How would I do this? How would I do that? And, it's went through a few iterations to get to that stage. You learn each time
Yeah.
you go through an iteration. And, but I just talked to some good people, in my community. I found some really good people that knew about manufacturing, and they led me to the right people. And, before we knew it, we had a product and we could test it. And upon testing it, we could make it better. And, a couple more iterations, we really have something that works fantastically. And the good thing about it, like, I know you guys ask a lot of questions about business, and I'm starting to like business a lot more, but
Yeah.
I'm not a natural business guy. I like helping people.
Yeah.
And I wasn't helping people as easily when I had to give them 6 or 7 exercises. I could tell they weren't doing them. I could tell they were confused. I actually couldn't take their hands through full range of motions, like with an elastic band. I
Mm.
couldn't have them open their hand fully or the elastic band would fall off. Very difficult. Now with this thing, with Handmaster Plus, I can explain it and I know the people are doing it properly. So they go home and I know they're not confused. It's just a matter of it only works if you do it. So you've just got
Yep.
to do it, you know?
No, that's awesome. No, that's awesome, Dr. Terry. And I'm sure you've seen probably thousands of hands. For our audience, is there a common prototype of hand that kind of lends itself to professional athletes, whether it's size, whether it's maybe thickness, softness, harden. Uh, what are the typical pro athlete type of hands that you see, if
Yeah,
there is a prototype?
yeah, there. I don't know that there is. I could say, you get into, some of the sports that demand, a little bit more, like a little bit more physicality. And when I say that, it's funny. I don't think I've ever been asked that question, but when I think about it, I was about to say there's some, like, we work with, when we first started. So we're Canadian, and I'm in the Lower Mainland of Vancouver. We
Mm-hmm.
first started, we worked a lot with the BC Lions, and I mean,
CFL team.
the CFL. Sorry, of the CFL, exactly.
Yep.
So we worked a lot with the BC Lions, and I had some friends. I was a basketball player in high school, but I had some buddies in the prairies of Canada that were football players. And one guy especially was ridiculous. Running back, could do the 100 in next to nothing. He was just a real great athlete. He tried out for, I believe, he went to school in Saskatchewan, I think, and then he tried out for the Rough Riders, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
I'd have to ask the fellow. I'm not going to mention his name in case I'm wrong. And he didn't even come close. So
Wow.
I realized the level of the CFL athlete. When I went and we were working with them, they were some big boys. And one of the guys we worked with was a middle linebacker who had monster hands. Uh,
Mm.
Most of the guys, I would say, like in football, there was just bigger guys in general. It's just a heavy. Uh, Maybe some of the running backs had a little bit smaller hands, but they were strong guys. Um, so I would say in certain areas, you'd get, a little bit bigger, stronger guys. We work also with NBA teams and stuff. And so now, to become an NBA player, you're generally going to be a pretty tall guy, and you're just generally going to have pretty long limbs everywhere. And to control a basketball to the level that these guys do, usually you have to have big mitts. And some of these guys are just beasts, right? They're just big, but they're strong, and they're talented, and they're coordinated. They're not just, it's pretty impressive at that level. Then you'll still have guys that are guards, and they're like more like me. I'm 6'2". I got, medium to medium large hands, probably. Medium large is my golf club.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so in basketball, it was very different. What I would say in golf, I noticed there's just all different sizes. There's some guys with monster hands, and you can almost tell with how much they cover in their grip. Some guys with smaller hands. I will say that of of on the athletic side and the music side, not necessarily the ergonomic side, but I would say they're all very strong. Like a
Mm-hmm.
golfer, you think about somebody that's been hitting golf shots, you know, hundreds or thousands of golf shots every single day all their life to get to that level. The elite guys, they're all strong. Some of them have bigger hands, some have smaller hands. Football, they're just strong guys, like strong guys. And then basketball, I would say it's just you get, big hands to control that basketball. And then after that, with musicians, it's all over the map. Ergonomics, it's definitely all over the map and a lot weaker.
Yep.
Then the one thing I would say is that people ask this question: if any of your listeners are on the bigger side, and they're athletes, and they want to strengthen their hands, we make the product so it's kind of mid-range hand size wise. But when we work with like an NBA athlete, if we work with one of our trainers, we have a soft and a medium and a firm.
Mm.
So we'll often have them use the medium ball to train, and the soft cord, because they take the soft cord so long that it
Yeah.
becomes basically the resistance of a medium cord. So there's ways around the extremes. Um, but yeah, hand sizes are all over the map. But certain sports, they, dictate the size of the athlete that they attract.
Excellent. Now, that makes 100% sense. So I totally get that what you're saying. Where do you see the progression of hand science? Seems like it's come a long way since from when you first got into the field to now. Where do you see it progressing in the next 3 to 5 years?
Yeah, that's something that we really we pay attention to closely. It's again, because of your show, you guys understand this, but it's a big world out there.
Yeah.
It's amazing. Some of the trade shows. Like, we do a lot of professional trade shows, like athletic trainers and stuff. We're about to go to a hockey athletic trainer show at the end of June in Florida. And
Oh,
so,
nice.
but we do like hand therapists, physiotherapy shows, chiropractic shows, and even within those shows, probably 1/5 of the people have know of our product. So we haven't even touched the market, even within the people that should know, should be curious about us. Um, and as far as the layperson, uh, it might be one in 20 or 30. Who knows? I don't know the exact stat.
Yeah.
Our goal, though, is, and again, people might read me of saying, "Well, you just want to grow your business." Well, I guess I do. But what the part of growing your business is that there is so much mistaken opinion about what there's so much poor knowledge about what hand exercise is. So any layperson is either doing nothing, that's and
Mhm.
and they're just gripping, and they're slowly building this imbalance that I know is happening, but there's no way they could know. And then if they are training their hands, they're using, you know, spring loaded or coiled or a racquetball or whatever, some type of squeeze only device. And I know that's slowly heading them towards imbalance and problems. Uh, so the problem is, it's not a small problem, James. So when I talk to people about, we're really working hard we're doing lots of podcasts so we can educate people about it. It's also an interesting area how
Absolutely.
your body's built these phenomenal hands. Like, let's understand them and let's use them properly. The other thing I'll say about that, and we're getting back to answering your question, is that we've also seen through doing this, and that's one thing about getting into your business. You think you understand where you're going, and then you get into it, and it's like, whoa, I didn't know that would happen. I didn't know this would happen.
Yeah.
So we started to see the benefit. If you can imagine, okay, so, I'm living my life, and I never do anything with my extremities other than, maybe, my phone or type or whatever, read. I do little, very little. Think of the blood flow that's going to your extremities. Not very much, because you're not
Mhm.
asking your body to do very much. So one of the things we've seen is that as we have somebody exercising on a regular basis, not only do we get some thumb, finger, carpal tunnel, wrist balance, forearm balance, elbow balance, which is going to prevent the repetitive grip injuries. We're going to prevent injuries, but we're also going to improve performance. But I can tell you, one of the biggest things that we do now is that we're going to stimulate blood flow and lymph drainage. So better blood flow, better lymph drainage means we have movement within our body, so we're going to get rid of toxins better. Um, there's just a lot we can accomplish just by doing that simple. And the exercise I showed, James, to you and your audience, was, we call that a figure eight exercise.
Okay.
But our
Figure
main
eight.
exercise is just closing against the ball, opening and spreading. So that's our basic exercise. And just by doing that, we're going to get blood flow to the extremities and better lymph drainage away. And we're going to, stimulate that strength and length and balance. That's what I want to bring to people. I want this is here to help people. Now, as a process of helping people, our business gets better. It's a great thing, but I
There's nothing wrong with that.
there's nothing wrong with that. I absolutely
Yeah.
think it's the thing that we should all be looking for. Is, I don't think I could do anything where I'm going like, well, I get the money, but nobody really gets helped. I don't know how anybody could live. I can't live my life that way, and I think it's the way where you're at peace with yourself. But we're motivated by that all the time. I realize how little people know about their hands, and now every single day we get up and we educate them about it in different ways through podcasts and social media and whatever else, some advertising. So I see this being a market that grows, and I see it being something that gets not just related to performance and injury prevention, but I think in the next 3 to 5 years, I see it being related to improving your health. And if we don't have shows like this, James, where I can talk to you and explain the whole way through, people would say, like, what the heck could the hands possibly have anything to do with your health? But when we
Yeah.
look at them and we see how much they've been passed over in our exercise and our healthcare and how little we know about them, it allows us to expand our mind into a place where we're going like, wow, we have a whole category of health we can help by getting blood flow to the extremities. So that's where I
Absolutely.
see it. I see it being way more diverse and way more recognized, that these hands have not been paid attention to properly, and there's many benefits of doing it, and we're going to continue to push that.
No, absolutely, Dr. Terry. You have a great mission, and I'm a lot smarter about hands now than I was, say 30, 35 minutes ago. So you've done a tremendous job of explaining to someone that doesn't know much about hands. I'm one of those people that you're explaining, don't do much with it. Um, where can, speaking of which, just getting the word out, where can people find your website, your social channels? Where can they find you online, Dr. Terry?
Yeah, we're always usually under Handmaster Plus. So our website is at handmasterplus.com. That's the best place to get all the information. And we have different distributors, especially in North America. But throughout Europe and stuff, you can find us in most places. Um, and always available, online. There's lots of ways to find Handmaster Plus. Our main website is doczac.com, which is doczac.com. And that shows a couple of our other stuff, other projects that we're doing. But Handmaster Plus is the one we put, that's kind of our flagship product. And it's a great product, easy to get a hold of, affordable, and super easy to work with.
Excellent, Dr. Terry. Thank you so much for all the knowledge and the education, really, on hands and the Handmaster Plus sounds like a great product. So everyone in the audience, definitely check it out. And thanks for joining Adeptus On-Air, Dr. Terry.
James, thanks for having me, and thanks for letting me talk to your audience, and keep up the good work. Love your show.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thanks for listening to Adeptus On Air. If you like this episode, please subscribe and leave a review. The views and opinions by the podcast speakers and guests are solely their own and do not reflect the opinions of Adeptus. This podcast provides general information only and is not intended to constitute advice.